Should you take breaks or should you grind it out throughout the year? We're going to talk about that today on the With Winning Mind podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Troy Basham, along with the legend Lanny Basham, founder of Mental Management Systems. And we're talking about just should you take breaks and how often should you take a break? Well, that might depend on the sport you're in. It might also depend on where you're at what level you are within your sport. So let's look over and see, what do we mean by break? You know, we're talking about a principle, right, of the break?
Yeah, there's a principle that we teach that called the principle of the break that says that when you take a break, you forget what you're doing wrong faster than what you're doing right. And so by taking a break, you actually are putting some space between the time that you were making mistakes and the time that you train again. So, like if you were, it's more than just a rest from the sport. It's actually taking your attention away from the sport. And many times when people train too much, they tend to be constantly worried about what they're doing wrong. And when you take a break, they kind of forget what they're doing wrong. And when they come back from the break, they tend to be refreshed and tend to get more out of their training. And so that's why that principle is true. But I was talking to a client earlier this week, and he just asked me, how many days a week should I train? You know, are there advantages and disadvantages? And so we were talking about that. And I think that there's a problem I personally think that there's a problem with training 7 days a week. You have no break. And I think it's probably not advisable. I think 6 days a week is better than 7. And I question whether 6 is better than 5. You know, I don't. We'd have to test that out to see what if that worked out for you. But most of the clients that I have are on 4 to 5 days a week. And when I ran the International Shooting School for about 11 years, we didn't train more than 4 or 5 days a week. So I remember one time I had a surgeon, and he was a shotgun shooter, and he told me, he says, I can only go to the gun club 4 days a month. I mean, I can. Every time I go to the gun club, I'm not doing surgery, and it costs me a lot of money by not doing that. But I'm willing to commit 4 days a month to go to train to get a little bit better in my shotgun shooting. He wasn't super serious about his sport. He was serious enough to take some lessons. And I told him, I said, well, if my advice to you is you skip a week, and you instead of training 1 day a week, you skip a week so that you can train 2 days in a row. Because I definitely believe that 2 days back to back is an advantage of training 1 day a week. 1 day a week, you probably end up not getting better and be sore all the time. But if you can train multiple days, there's an advantage to that. And
yeah, there's a similar client that he had years ago that was he basically only had 2 days a week that he could train. And the recommendation was, instead of doing Monday and Thursday or Monday and Friday like he was doing, do 2 days back to back and then 5 days off, 2 days, 5 days off. And he was quite shocked. He was like, well, why would I do that?
Yeah.
And the reason why you would do that is because the second day, if you shot really good the first day, like if this guy was just sporting clay shooting, shot really good the first day, well, you're gonna feed. What's the probability the next day you're gonna feed off that and shoot really, really good? It's really high. But if you didn't shoot well, what's the correction? You probably know what the correction is. Now you know what to work on. Where if you gave yourself 3-4 days, you probably forgot what you need to work on. So you don't really get to build on that. So if we look at it, are there sports that you think that need more training through the week, less training the week? And I bring this up because we work with two sports that if you gave them, you can train every day, they would. And that's archery and golf. These two sports, these individuals, these athletes want to train every single day for different reasons, but they want to train every day. And my argument to that is, one, if you train 7 days a week, how do you know when one training period ended and another one began? And then two, you don't really take advantage of the principle of the break. You don't let the mind and the body rest. So if you do start to create a bad habit, I take a day or two off, come back, and now maybe that has gone away, and I go right back to what I'm training and keep success going on. What's your opinion on the sports that people feel like I have to train almost every single day?
Well, it may vary with sports, because some sports, like team sports, normally your training days are set by somebody else. So I'm working with a kicker right now in football, and he now in the off season he can train every day if he wants to, but when training camp starts, when ball camp starts, he's going to be training the way that his coaches dictate. So it's not up to him, and that's fine. That it's not necessarily a bad thing in team sports to have your coaches decide how you're gonna train, because you have other people that are necessary. I mean, he kind of needs a holder. Occasionally, they need to train that, and the long passer and all that stuff has to happen for him to be able to simulate a competition and get ready for a competition. And I think there's certain times in a season when you intensify the training, even in sports that are individual sports, and so one of these days we might get into that segmenting training, but. It's not only a sports-specific issue, but it's also where are you in your journey? I mean, if you most people, when they start, like just say our sport, when they start, the opportunity to train is like, well, come to the 4-H meeting once a week, and you don't have the opportunity to have range access, the rest of the time. So you're forced to train once a week, kind of in an introductory class to learn how to shoot. And later on, when you get into a club and where you can go to select your own amount of time to train, I think in the beginning, training 4 or 5 days a week is an advantage, because there's a lot to learn about how many shots does it take for you to automate a certain necessary part of the shot sequence. And it takes the more you shoot, the faster that happens. So I think training a lot in the beginning is an advantage. But I saw people at the Army Marksmanship Unit where I was training, world champions they rarely trained. There were periods of time where they chose not to practice, and they still won big time. And I was out there training every day, working hard, and they weren't showing up. And I thought, this isn't fair, They're beating me, and I'm working harder than they are, and they knew what they needed to do. And when you get to a certain level, it may not be so important that you increase the number of days. So it kind of depends on where you are in your shooting journey or your sport journey, and also what happens in the sport specific differences. But I think the principle is one that I'm convinced that 7 days a week is a bad idea, and 1 day a week is a temporary solution. You need to train more than 1 day a week, and probably I question whether 6 days a week is better than 5.
Yeah, I think it might be on the individual, might be on the sport. But you mentioned about taking breaks, and you're being strategic. Like during the week, if I'm going to train 4 days on, take 3 days off in a row, 4 days on. But before we started, we were talking about there's 2 other times that you feel like you need to take a break, more of an extended period of time. And one is after a major competition. Mm-hmm. So we've got the Olympic Games coming up this summer in Paris, and there's a lot of individual sports in the Olympics. Once they get done, they're going to take an extended break. They're probably going to take several days to a week off. But then there's also at the end of the year, you always recommended taking an extended period, like a week or maybe 2 weeks, kind of like a vacation. And you always relate it to, look, why do they give us vacation time at work so we don't get burned out? So as part of the extended break, burnout, or is that mainly a yearly thing where, no, I'm going to take an extended break at the end of the year to separate 1 year from the other to reduce burnout, and the extended break of the tournament is for another reason? What's your opinion on what separates those 2 things from what we've been talking about with weekly breaks?
Well, what happens in certain sports, like sports that are outdoors, done outdoors, so weather matters. If you're a shotgun shooter, and your national championships are in October, and hunting season is coming up, and you hunt, you're probably going to take a holiday for something else. Or if you live up north where the weather is going to be a problem in the wintertime, you probably are going to train less in the wintertime than you would in the summer. So there are reasons why you take a break other than just focusing on your sport. How about balancing your life out with family? I mean, you probably are not going to train on Christmas Day or New Year's Day, or let's take a. When do you take a break and go do something else that's important to you in your life? And I think having some kind of balance to your life, it has an important factor to consider in training. So when you planning your year out, you know what competitions you're going to go to, and depending on what your level in the year is, matters. But like right now, I would imagine that the Olympics is coming up, and the people that have a legitimate chance of making the Olympic team have probably pushed everything away from the Olympic year to try to make room for to maximize their training for their sport, and after the Olympics is over, they'll catch up with things that they pushed away and try to balance out their life a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the next several months, because we're approaching the summer real quick. It's almost springtime, and so now we hit the summer. A lot of guys ramp it up during that time, right before the Olympics, they kind of level out. And then after the Olympics, I imagine they would take some time off to be with their families and so forth. So it's interesting when we look at these 3 reasons to take a break. So going back and reviewing, one, the principal break says we often perform better after taking a break. So it's best to have a couple days off, maybe longer, depending on your sport and your situation. But definitely you prefer the 4-day, 3 days off, 5-day, 2 days off type of approach. Kind of simulates the average work week we have in the United States. You'll see a lot of people that will do 4 days on. I know there's several fields where they'll look longer hours, 10 to 12 hours, 4 days a row, but then they give them 3 days off to recuperate, take care of the things that they need to take care of. And then you got your standard 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, take the weekends off kind of thing. So I think using that model in sport is really good. Then you got your extended break after a big event. Let's face it, after a huge event like a World Championships, an Olympic Games, a Continental Championships, or in some cases, maybe the Nationals is the biggest event that you have.
Yeah.
You're drained after that competition.
Yeah,
trained
no
really
kidding.
hard leading up to that. So you're going to want to take an extended break. Just 1 or 2 days is enough. You're probably going to take 3+ days off for that one, and then you've got your massive vacation that separates 1 year from the other. And so all of this helps the individual, I believe, to stay mentally and physically fresh throughout the season. The other thing I think it's important on why we need to take these breaks is it's only a matter of time where you're going to get injured or you're going to get sick, and you're forced to take time off. If you don't pre-plan taking multiple days off and then coming back to training and competing, when you're forced to take time off, how are you going to have the confidence that when you come back, you're going to be ready to go?
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed is that people that are forced to take breaks for the reasons that you mentioned, when they come back, I have heard many times that they come back, and if for some reason they can't train, so like for 2 weeks before a big tournament, but they're well enough to compete in the tournament, you would think that they would have problems. But I have heard many times that people have taken a break, and they shoot great, especially the first day right after they come back. Now, if it's a 3-day competition, somewhere in there, the fact that they haven't been shooting kind of catches up with them a little bit, and so that they not being able to train, maybe it affects their endurance a little bit more than anything else. But normally, people coming off of a break tend to do extremely well. I don't think you should be worried about those of you that are watching this that compete. That don't worry too much about the fact that you're forced to take a break, either because of your gun's off at the shop, or you can't train for whatever reason. Weather delays keeps you off the venue.
You're not going to forget how to do it, are you?
Don't worry about that. I'll tell you what you need to worry about. You need to worry about if you decide you're going to cram for the exam, like, okay, I'm going to take 2 weeks off from work and I'm going to train every day right before a tournament. Now, I have heard stories of people that do that don't perform well at all in tournaments. I mean, that's a common story. But the ones that are forced to take a break, coming back, sometimes they shoot great, or they perform great.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm also reminded of another reason why taking a break works, and that is when you're not doing well. If you're not doing well, taking a few days off might be the right medicine for you to take. And so I'm watching this podcast of a poker player, and he's just entertaining to watch. And he went on a skid the beginning of the year. Did not start well for him. He lost over $600,000 in 1 month.
Oh my!
Yeah, and so he's like, okay, this is not a month period. This is a 4-week period. Lost over 600. So now here he is. He's approaching the end of January, and he's like, okay, I need to do something here. So he takes takes like 2 or 3 weeks off, doesn't play at all. So I'm not going to play. I'm just going to get away from this. And then he started reflecting on it a little bit. He started looking at, okay, are there some things I need to correct and work on? And he started working on that, and then he jumped back in. And so in the very first one, he vlogged it. So he made a comment because I'm kind of nervous vlogging this because I'm about to jump into a $100,000 entry in this poker game. I don't know if it was a tournament or a cash game, but he's like, this is the first time I've been back in 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm going to film it. So he films it, goes in there, and he winds up being successful. And he comes back, he says, man, I was really nervous. But it goes to show that if you take time off to get away and then you reflect on it, you're much more clear-minded about what the solution might be of what you need to do. Now, some might argue in that particular game or sport, how much of that can you control versus the environment. But I think the principle still holds true, is that no matter what sport you're doing, if you're not performing well, and you can stop and take some time off, and there's a few sports that we can do that. Now, definitely there's some times where we can't do it. Like if you're not performing well and you got the qualifier coming up to get to the big game that you want to go to, like the World Championships or something like that, yeah, you're kind of stuck. You can't do that. But in the time where you can, it's a good idea to be disciplined, to take a step back, look at what you're doing, and then reflect on it with a clear mind, and then go out there and compete and trust that your skill level is there. Now, I'm talking about someone who's a high-level competitor. I mean, this person's won, I don't know how many tournaments in their lifetime and won millions of dollars. So it's not like this is a person who's in the first year of competing. And I think that would hold true with any competition. So if we look at this and wrapping up this scenario, based on taking breaks, what's the one main piece of advice that you would want people to take away today that says, now, when it comes to break, this is what you want to remember?
I think you need to schedule your breaks. You need to have a reason to do it. You got to commit to the break. You got to commit to the rationale that you're going to do this, and understand and believe that coming back off the break, you're going to come back refreshed and you're going to do better, and that will happen.
Great. We're going to talk more about this on our Patreon channel. If you like this information, please subscribe, hit the like button, share it with other people. We're going to break down how Lanny specifically used this principle in his training to dominate in his sport. Take care, and we'll see you next time.